the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday. Ooh, it's kind of ugly and gray out there in Southern California. But hey, I'll be back in Puerto Rico soon enough with the sunshine and the warmth. It's cold in California. I mean, man, it's like 57 degrees outside. It's freezing. I've become accustomed to the Caribbean lifestyle where it never goes under 70 in the middle of the night, never goes under 75 during the day. And I kind of like that. So I can't wait to get back to the warmth, the beach of the Caribbean, of Puerto Rico. Okay, today we're going to talk about optimism, about the future, about kind of predicting the future. And but before that, just some stuff about what's going on. I did say yes. I think I said this on Thursday. I hate to pat myself on the back, but what the hell, right? We've got a show. I did say Thursday that the Supreme Court would unanimously reject the Texas case, that there might be a chance it would be 8-1 or 7-2. Well, I mean, they basically agreed not to hear the Texas case by a 7-2 margin, and that's only because Alito and Thomas believe that whenever one state sues another state, the Supreme Court should take the case, no matter what. So not on the merits of the case they wanted to take it, but just because it was a state suing another state. But that was a 7-2 decision. All three of Trump's appointees voted against it. But on the content, basically Alito and Thomas both said that they would have not given Texas and the other states and the Trump administration, they would have not given them the remedies that they were asking for. They would not have given a temporary injunction on the election. They would have delayed the Electoral College, which meets, I guess, on the 14th, so in 2 days. And so basically it was a unanimous, thorough defeat of the whole Trump idea that, that's the whole idea that Trump won this election, and the whole election, systemic fraud in the election, that whole idea is basically took a massive beating by the Supreme Court of the United States, probably the most conservative court in the land. Probably the court you would think would lean most favorably to the Trump administration in the land, and they rejected the case. There's still, I guess, a hearing today in front of the Wisconsin Supreme Court where they're arguing. Again, my guess is that will be thrown out before the Electoral College meets on Monday. So it's quite clear that the Electoral College on Monday will vote for Biden, and that'll be over with. It'll be over. I mean, I guess they can still sue, they can still go to court, they can still do all this, and they certainly will be making noise for the next 4 to 8 years. But it's a done deal, and I know we've got at least one person on the chat right now who says Trump won, and he's going to stay in office, and this election will be overturned, but it won't. It won't. Again, I encourage January 20th when Biden is inaugurated. It'll be interesting to see how many of those who are claiming that will never happen are willing to admit they were wrong and to apologize for the insults. Those of them who have been insulting on this issue. So. Trump lost. You might be supportive of that. You might hate that. You might think it's a good thing. You might think it's a bad thing that he lost. But reality is what it is, and Trump lost. And the sooner the sooner Trump supporters come to grips with that, the sooner Trump supporters accept that, the sooner they can start working to reverse the loss in 2024 and maybe to get voters out in Georgia so that the Republicans don't lose the Senate, and maybe to get voters out in 2022 to take back the House. It now looks reasonable to assume Republicans could take the House in 2022 and hold on to the Senate in 2022. There's a ton still to do if you would like to see Democrats not have their agenda come to reality, and that work needs to be done. And all this stuff about Trump winning the election is a distraction, and basically, why on January 6th? So the election will be overturned on January 6th in Trump's favor, and Ragnar expects my apology on that date. If the election is overturned on January 6th, I will apologize. But it won't. So, and I know that with about as much certainty as I think I know pretty much anything. So it's done. Focus on Georgia. Isn't January 4th the Georgia race for the Senate? I mean, or the 6th or the 5th or something. I'm not sure what the 6th is. Oh, January 6th is when Congress counts the electoral votes. Oh, yeah, well, okay. There's no way Congress is going to overturn this. So, yes, January 6th, you will either get my apology or I expect you to come here and admit that you were wrong on the show on January 5th or 6th or whatever. January 5th, we'll have the Georgia election. I hope that all your conspiracy theory BS does not detract from Republicans' ability to win in Georgia. I think that's far more important than overturning the Trump election, which I actually hope doesn't happen because I'm glad that Trump lost. But I do very much hope Republicans hold the Senate. So I very much hope that the Republicans win both seats, or at least one of those seats in Georgia. And I worry that all this conspiracy theory talk is going to make that more and more difficult. So that's kind of that's kind of bringing you up to speed on what's going on. I didn't name call anybody. I just said conspiracy theory is BS, which it is. I didn't name call you, Ragnar, or anybody else. And I didn't accuse you of name calling. I just said some people who use it as insults. Anyway, let's see. What else do we want to come up to speed with in terms of what's going on in the world? Not much. I mean, things are pretty quiet, I'd say. Not a lot going on. Looking through the news. Basically, it's almost all focused on either the election or on Hunter Biden. Now, of course, as I said, I never doubted the fact. I always believed the fact that he was corrupt. And Hunter Biden and more lockdowns now in New York City. Indoor dining is shut down. Basically, the mayors and governors of these states are dedicated to destroying the restaurant business. It's quite stunning to see, and it'll be interesting to see if come election time the electorates will make them suffer the consequences, or is this all something the electorate actually supports? Hard to tell. Hard to tell. All right, we're getting some super chat questions. That's good. We'll get to them later. Reminder, if you want to ask questions, best way to do so is on YouTube on the super chat. You can ask a question, put a dollar amount next to that question. The larger the dollar amount, the more likely it is that I answer the question. Super Chat is a great way to support the show, value for value. I assume you guys get value from the show. That's why you listen. It'd be great for you to express that. The best way to express that is by financially supporting the show and helping make it possible. You can do that through the Super Chat. But actually, the best way to do that is through a monthly contribution. Steady. It could be, some people do $2, people do $500 a month, anywhere from $2 to $500. I'll take more than 500 if anybody wants to. I think we've got one person who does 750. So a month. So that is all incredibly helpful. And you can do that on youronbookshow.com/support. You can do that on Patreon. You can do that on Subscribestar. You could do that on Locals. The nice thing about monthly contributions is that I know they are coming, and therefore I know that they are, that I know what to expect in terms of monthly income, and it helps me plan my finances and my future. So appreciate in particular the monthly contributors, although I love Jason, who gets on here pretty much every show and donates a significant amount of money, or contributes a significant amount of money. I prefer the word contribute to donate. Contributes a significant amount of money on the Super Chat and asks lots of questions, which is great because it gives a lot of content to the show, and they're good questions. So there's always stuff for me to answer, which is great. Okay. All right. I'm not sure what the issue is with mandatory vaccines. No objectivist would support mandatory vaccines for something like this. It's not something you mandate. So I think we would be anti-mandatory vaccination. Ragnar's still looking forward to my apology, which is not, it's not going to happen. So I'm not too worried about it. And he should be very worried. Thursday on the show, I had a number of people who were convinced the Supreme Court was going to side with Trump, and it was obvious that they would not. So I'm not worried about having to apologize. All right. Oh my God. We got some interesting questions. Good. Let's get into this question about the future. The question of optimism, pessimism, or having a view of the future, I think is an important question. You live in the present, but your concern is the future. Indeed, the past, to a large extent, is irrelevant. It's only relevant in the sense that it guides your present. It has shaped your present. It has shaped the present around us. And you can learn from it about what to expect in the future. That is, history is super important, not because of we need to obsess about what happened, and the same with personal history, the same with what happened to you as a person. The only reason the past is important is today, that is, the past is important today, is that you can learn from it about the future. And why is the future important? The future is important because that's where you're going to live. You're going to live in the future. You're going to live. The present is going to happen to you. I mean, the future is going to become your present soon enough. At least the older you get, that future shrinks, and that's a reality. The younger you are, the more distant that future is, and the more important the future is, because the future is longer, and there's more about what's going to happen in the future that's relevant to your life. So you cannot live, you cannot sustain your life without planning for the future, without having an opinion about what is going to happen in the future. Because again, the future is where you're going to be living. And to plan, you have to have some view of what that future is. I mean, at the most simple basis, if you really believe we're heading toward Armageddon, then you might want to build, like people used to, I guess, in the 50s and also, I'm sure today, you want to build one of those bunkers with survivalist gear and food supply forever because we're heading towards some nuclear catastrophe or a civil war or whatever. Or if you think there's going to be a civil war, you want to get a significant amount of ammo and guns and food and provisions, and you might want to have a plan to hunker down somewhere where you're not going to get shot in the crossfire, or you might want to have a plan to join one of the sides. On the other hand, if you think that things are going to be good in the future, you have to decide how to invest your money. Is interest rates? Do you think buying government bonds is a good idea? Or do you think investing in technology or investing in the stock market? Or everything is about. I mean, a lot of what we spend our time doing is trying to figure out how to act in the present in order to make our lives better, easier, richer, more fulfilling, more substantial in the future. So we have to have a view about what is going to happen in that future. And we need to be super realistic about that. And this is where this whole optimism, pessimism thing, I mean, if optimism, pessimism is a bias, if optimism and pessimism is orientation that moves you away from being rational and realistic and fact-based, then you don't want to be optimistic or pessimistic. You want to be fact-based. But I do think there is a question of whether, in your estimation of the future, do you think the positives outweigh the negatives, or the negatives outweigh the positives, and over what time frame? And that will determine, I think, whether you're an optimist or a pessimist. And there might be areas in which you are optimistic and areas in which you're pessimistic. But you still have to have an overall view of the future. Because again, that overall view of the future is going to dictate how you behave right now. It's going to dictate, in a financial sense, how you save your money, how you invest your money, what you do with your money. Whether you're buying gold and burying it in the backyard, which is what you would do if you thought things are going to hell and they're going to hell quickly. Now, the problem is that the future is uncertain. It hasn't happened yet. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We can have strong views and we can have strong levels of confidence about certain big trends, particularly over long periods of time. But it's very hard to say exactly how things are going to develop. So you can say things like, if a positive philosophy, the philosophy of objectivism, let's say, doesn't have a significant influence on the world in the next 20 to 30 years, things are going to get a lot worse, because philosophy, ideas drive life, drive history, therefore drive the future. But exactly how does a good philosophy affect the future? Exactly in what areas is it going to affect the future? How much of the good philosophy will delay or bias time? How much influence is enough influence to stop a complete falling off a cliff in the dark ages? How much of a positive influence, and where's that positive influence going to be? Does it have to be in America? Can it be in the other parts of the world? So one has to take into account the entire scope of the complexity. Now, Leonard Peikoff does a brilliant job in both The Ominous Parallels and in Dim Hypothesis of laying out the philosophical requirements for civilization to survive, the philosophical threats to civilization surviving, and kind of the paths that those threats can take. And I agree completely with his analysis in those books in terms of, if those philosophies dominate, if those philosophies are unchallenged, then it is inevitable that human civilization will decline. But at what pace, over what period of time, what happens in the meantime, to what extent does a better philosophy have to have an impact in order to avoid the worst of the outcomes? All these things are uncertain. All these things are difficult to estimate. They're difficult to predict. And one has to take every aspect of human life into account. And I often make what I would call the pessimistic case for the future. I did so just last show when I talked about authoritarianism in America and it coming from left and right, and how left and right have both become authoritarian. And it doesn't really matter who I think is the greater threat. The very fact that both left and right are authoritarian does not bode well for the future of this country. And it's not like I see other countries moving in this fantastically pro-freedom direction. Even some countries that used to be moving in a relatively pro-freedom direction, I think are reversing course, whether that's in China or whether that's in Eastern Europe. Particularly, I'd say Eastern Europe, where I thought for a while things were looking very good, and they've taken a sharp turn towards collectivism and nationalism and authoritarianism, and towards more state control. So it is hard. So I've given kind of the pessimistic case. I've given the case for why I think things are going to hell, and there's a good case to be made. And what I'm going to be doing over many shows and various shows is giving you different cases. At the end of the day, you have to balance it all out and figure out how to use this information if you find it valuable, and I think you do because you listen to the show, in planning your own life, in assessing your own future. In assessing your own future. So let's look at some of the case for optimism, if you will. We've got people here who think that the nationalism and statism and central planning and authoritarianism in Eastern Europe is actually a good thing. I get that every show, right? There are people who pretend to be individualists and pro-capitalists who admire strongmen who are the exact opposite. And yet, it's, that's my ultimate case for pessimism is some of you people on my chat. Not everybody, but some of people on my chat are what personally make me pessimistic. I mean, some of you make me optimistic, because some of you are great, but some of you who try to hold Ayn Rand and hold, authoritarians in one, under one banner, or nationalism and racism and all this stuff under one banner, and think you can do that, just destroy my day. Destroy my day. All right. So let's make some arguments for optimism. The first I'll make is in the realm of politics. This one you won't like. In particular, I think it's good, and I think it's positive for the future that Trump lost. I think this is a cause for short-term optimism in the sense that I think that it gives a shot for the Republican Party to do some soul-searching, to rethink its course, to elevate leaders who are better, who are more consistent with the ideas of this country and the principles under which this country served. I think that we survived Trump, and that the country could, in the future, go back to kind of normal politics is a good sign. We'll see if we have survived Trump. It's not clear. We'll see what it's like with him in the opposition and him running, trying to run the Republican Party from the side. We'll see if the Republican Party can indeed survive. But I think overall, it is good to have cleansed Trump out of Republican politics. Again, maybe we haven't. Maybe he'll be back in 2024. Maybe he'll win. Maybe on January 6th. I'll be apologizing here because Trump will have a second term. I doubt that. I think it's much more likely he'll run in 2024. I think you'll have now a real debate within the Republican Party, a real challenge. Now, I'm not sure the good guys will win, but at least you'll have a debate, which I think is an improvement. I also think that overall, the legal system has responded, I think, rightly to all these accusations of fraud and everything going on, to an attempt by the Trump administration to steal this election, I think that we've got the system is working. At the end of the day, state legislatures are not going to override the voters and are not going to change the electoral college decision making. Congress will not do it, and the courts will not do it. So we're still not quite ready in this country for complete authoritarianism, and that is a good thing. I mean, imagine if the Supreme Court overturned this election. I mean, that would be quite something. That would be quite something, and that would be a move in a horrific direction, right? In a horrific direction. It's fascinating to me. WPR says, as Ayn Rand received money, anybody received money from George Soros? Of course not. Sounds like it. Yes, because anybody who objects to Trump, this is the religion of some of you Trumpists. Anybody who objects to Trump is therefore a leftist, is therefore in the pocket of George Soros. No, I just think Trump is a horrible human being, was a horrible president, has put us, has taken us a long way away from the principles of the founding fathers and the ideas of liberty and freedom, and good riddance to him. Right? Not that I like the fact that it's Biden who replaces him. I wish the Republicans had cleansed Trump and offered us a better candidate on the Republican side than Donald Trump. Then I would have been for that candidate instead of Biden, but they didn't. So this is the consequence. Other just quick points to be positive about politics, and I've talked about this in the past. In spite of the fact that Trump lost, Republicans did not. Republicans actually gained seats in the House. They held on to the Senate when they were expected to lose the Senate. I think that's all positive. And finally, a lot of the ballot initiatives, we talked about this in the past. A lot of the ballot initiatives came out positive to the cause of freedom, whether it's marijuana legalization, whether it's a rejection of affirmative action in California, a rejection of the idea of turning all Uber and Lyft drivers into employees in California, rejection of that, rejection of increase in property taxes in California, a rejection of progressive income tax in Illinois, a lot of really pro kind of liberty, if you will, votes on the part of actual, when it was clear cut. Now, a few that went against, like a minimum wage increase in Florida, and I think an increase in the top tax in Arizona. But overall, ballot initiatives went for the side of more freedom, and that I think is a positive development, and once that we should leverage. We should figure out why it's happened and leverage it, right? Leverage it. So quite striking. Yeah. So, Trump supporters are now, anybody who's not a Trump supporter is a leftist. And on the left, anybody who doesn't agree with the far left is a fascist. So what's the difference? I mean, these kind of Trump supporters who will support him no matter what he does, are the same as the leftists, the far leftists, in that they lump everybody who's not on their side into one category because they can't think in any more categories. There's left and Trump, nothing else. That's all there is. And these are the people I've been criticizing all these months. These are the people I've been criticizing all these years in terms of Trump supporters. Not everybody who voted for Trump, not everybody who supported Trump. These kind of people who, if you criticize Trump, you must be in support of AOC and in the pockets of George Soros. That kind of irrationality is what I've been objecting to all these months and all these years. What about education? We talk about a lot about all the horrible stuff that's going on in education. And it is. It's horrific. The university is horrific. The schools, the left just dominates the universities and the schools. And they've just, it truly is a disaster. The Marxism, the anti-Americanism, the critical race theory, the pseudo-intellectualism, the postmodernism that our kids are taught really from pre-kindergarten, the environmentalism that they're taught from pre-kindergarten. 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, I had to go to the kindergarten of my kids to tell them to stop teaching this environmental nonsense. 25 years ago, and and they were shocked that I would object. But education was just horrible, and yet, at the same time, I think there is a real potential to disrupt education completely, and maybe COVID, in some sense, is going to give this a push. People are really starting to question: do you need a degree? Do you need to go to college? People are starting to question: do you need a traditional school? People are experiencing some alternatives with in-home education that are potentially completely disruptive of the existing educational system. And then on top of that, you have objectivists. There's an objectivist who runs, and pretty much everybody senior in the organization, I think, is an objectivist or sympathetic, or at least good in education. Run the largest Montessori school system, I think, in the world. That's run by people committed to objectivism, people committed to a better educational program. You've got objectivists developing science education. You've got objectivists developing math education. There is a real investment. There's a real effort. There's a real growth in good educational products, in good education that is coming out of the objectivist movement, that's coming out of people who are trained by the Ayn Rand Institute in the Objective Academic Center and other places. And there are schools, there are educators, there are developers of curriculum, there are companies. This is done almost all on a for-profit basis. I mean, for years and years, I remember people used to say, oh, the Ayn Rand Institute needs to open a school. No, it never did. What it needed was to help train the people who could then open their own schools, which is what's happening. And these education products are not under the label of objectivism, so they are just rational educational products. They're being delivered that will help a new generation of young kids to think for themselves, to be able to think, to be able to read properly, write, and engage, and have a positive view of science. And I mean, that's a revolution. If you just had millions of kids who had a decent education in K through 12. And I think we're on the verge of major disruptions in the field of education. The existing system clearly does not work. The existing system under COVID completely fell apart. There are people who are doing quite well under COVID using alternative methodologies, and there is the potential here. There's a real potential for a real revolution in education before there is a philosophical revolution. Because these ideas are being brought into the field by people who have a better philosophy and by people who just want kids to be able to think, read, write, do science, do math. There are honest people out there who are not committed to Ayn Rand, who still want kids to have a good education. And they understand enough about what a good education entails that they would be supportive of that. And you're seeing that not just in the United States, you're seeing it around the world. Montessori schools are doing really, really well. I think somebody did a study about the number of entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley who in their preschool went to, or their kindergarten went to Montessori, and it's an astounding number. It's an astounding number. Montessori makes a difference in kids' future. So I think on the educational front, there is real reason to be optimistic. Now, that won't manifest itself in universities and colleges, but it's becoming clear that, and again, I think COVID will accelerate this, is that we really need the kind of education that we have been providing in the last few decades in universities and colleges. And particularly the quality of it, is it more harmful than good? It used to be that a well-rounded liberal arts education was a good thing, but when the liberal arts educators are teaching you reality doesn't exist, your job in the world is to sacrifice to worms or to trees or to some endangered species, and that the politics that should be admired are the politics of socialism because it's so wonderful for human beings, then what is exactly the value in a liberal arts education? Null, zip, nada. And today, look at how much of education is migrating to things like YouTube. And I think what you'll see coming out of COVID is a growth in things like Coursera and other free educational products, and much more emphasis on those, and much more focus on educational saving accounts, vouchers, and alternatives to conventional government-based education. I think there's a real opportunity in this, by the way. I think of all the political issues that we should be focusing on, I mean, I know people spend, the amount of energy people spend on Trump's re-election is astounding. If they took a fraction of that political energy, if they took just a fraction of the time they dedicate to this and dedicated it to advocating for, lobbying for education saving accounts or any type of voucher system that took decisions about education away from government and handed it to kids, just imagine how far we could advance and how better life could be. It's truly sad that we obsess about a person. And when there are real issues we can really make a difference in, I think education is one of them right now. That's boring. Nobody's interested in it. Or we're completely conventional when it comes to that. Why is my discussion group focused on video games, I think? Why is everybody talking video games? I don't know. I think it's Cook's bad influence. Maybe. I don't know. Something's going on there that I don't understand because I, of course, don't understand any of it. I think it's Action Jackson's bad influence. Maybe it's all of them together. All right. So that's politics. A little bit of positive news, maybe. Education. There's some things to be excited about and some things that we could actually push for and put some energy into. I think it's the field that can make the most difference in the world around us. But of course, where I think the most exciting thing is going on, and where things are going on in spite of politics, in spite of regulation, in spite of controls, in spite of taxes, in spite of even antitrust, in spite of everything that the government is throwing at them. The place that is most interesting is in business, in particular in technology, biotech, but even in things like aeronautics. So here's something fascinating, right? Let me just pull up the story. Here's something fascinating that you probably know. I don't know. To me, it was new. Space travel is something I think we should be very excited about, supportive of, and excited about in terms of the future. And maybe even think about, well, how do I benefit from this financially? So between 1970 and 2000, while the government dominated space travel, the cost to launch a kilogram into space was fairly steady from 1970 to 2000. Price did not go down. It was fairly steady. And it averaged about $18,500 per kilo. I don't know how much you weigh, but you can take your body weight and extrapolate what 18,500 is and then figure out how much it would cost to launch you into space. 18,500. The space shuttle that used to take stuff up and down, right? It had a payload of 27,500 kilograms. That cost $1.5 billion. So per kilogram, the shuttle, this great achievement of NASA, cost $54,500 per kilogram. So it was actually super expensive, right? Primarily because you had to take humans up and all of that. But to launch satellites, to launch anything into space, required on average $18,500 per kilo, and it was fairly static over 40 or 30 years. Right? One of the most important developments in this area, certainly the most important developments, but maybe one of the most important developments technologically for the future of mankind, is the fact that basically in the United States, space travel has been privatized. And shockingly, much of this came during the Obama administration. In 2010, Obama was trying to cut NASA's budget. He was trying to cut spending, partially pushed into that ultimately by Republicans in the House, cutting spending because he wanted to reprioritize the spending. And Obama basically went to NASA, and he was facing two alternatives. One is to increase spending and let NASA dominate space into the future. The other one was to outsource space travel to the private enterprise, where there was Boeing, with SpaceX, now Blue Origin from Jeff Bezos. There's also a company called Orbital, ATK, which has been purchased by Northrop Grumman. There's United Launch Alliance. So there are a few private enterprises. Boeing, maybe Boeing owns Northrop Grumman. I don't know. But anyway, all these companies have private space programs. And the Trump administration decided that it was not going to give NASA the money. Indeed, it cut NASA's budget dramatically. It was hugely criticized at the time. And it might turn out to be the best thing the Trump administration did for humanity. Because what it did was unleash the private enterprise on space and on sending things out into orbit and ultimately to the moon and to Mars. As I said, there are probably 5 different companies competing right now to put things into orbit. Satellites, communication satellites, defense satellites, all kinds of stuff like that. Including for foreign countries. Not everything is just American. These are going to be international. They will do this for anybody, anywhere. I'm not sure if anybody, but they will do it for a lot of different people. And you've got all these companies competing, and of course we know what competition does. We know what the private sector can do. We know what competition does. I wish NASA, instead of being all government-owned in the 1960s, imagine if Kennedy's challenge had not been for the government to develop a program to send man to the moon, but it being the government to, maybe even promote the growth in the private sector to send man to the moon. Now, that still would have been non-ideal because the government would have been still involved. But imagine if, starting in the 1960s, you would have had 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 companies competing. Robert Heinlein had this great short story where the way you get them incentivized is you give the first company that gets the moon rights over the moon. Mining rights, advertising rights. So I think Coca-Cola gets there and they put a Coca-Cola sign on the moon. I mean, that's a permanent billboard that everybody on the planet can see, and it's pretty spectacular. Anyway, it's the idea of privatization, the idea of competing and using private property rights in order to do it is amazing, right? Imagine if the United States government guaranteed that whoever private companies could get to an asteroid to mine it would get all those mining rights, and that the government wouldn't just take it. If there was some law in place that said mining, a property rights bill that applied to mining asteroids, then you might actually get private companies starting to really consider it, because asteroids are incredibly rich in minerals. Yeah, the short story by Robert Heinlein is called "The Man Who Sold the Moon." It's a fabulous story. It was written in the 1950s, I think, before Apollo, and it's just a fun short story that's just fabulous, as a lot of Robert Heinlein's work is. Anyway, since the 2000, with the growth in SpaceX and over the last decade with the growth in private space travel, the cost to take a kilogram up into space has dropped from an average $18,500, $54,500 for the space shuttle, to $2,200 per kilogram. $2,200 per kilogram. So what's that, 80% or something? It's dropped. Elon Musk's goal with his new rockets. One of those rockets was tested the other day, I think in California, and wasn't 100% successful, but probably 80% successful in its test. With these new generation of rockets, Musk's goal is to lower the cost to put stuff into space to ultimately $10 a kilogram. $10 a kilogram. Down from $18,500 on average. Now imagine what that could do, to our ability to put a base on the moon, ultimately to get to Mars, but also just in lower Earth orbit, what we could put in lower Earth orbit. One of the plans that are already being implemented is to put tens of thousands of satellites into low Earth orbit that will provide internet telecommunication coverage across the entire planet, from everywhere on the planet to everywhere on the planet, 24/7, with a high bandwidth. The technology is getting there. The satellites are getting cheap enough, and the delivery of the satellites to low Earth orbit is getting cheap enough that we can do that. So we have the capacity, or we're going to have the capacity, whether it's Jeff Bezos in Blue Origin, or United Launch, or ATK, or whoever, or SpaceX, to put satellites into space at a cost of $10 per kilogram, which is just basically unbelievable in terms of the reduction of cost. And then what you have is this telecommunication at basically a cost of zero across the entire planet. Everybody is connected. Now, I know some of you fear that and are worried about that. Oh my God, the whole world is going to be connected. People in other countries will be connected to us. I know some people fear that, object to that, worry about that. But as you know, I'm a huge fan of globalization. I believe in if you have division of labor, specialization across 8 billion people, then the wealth, our wealth, all of our wealth, is going to grow dramatically. If you have 8 billion people connected, the ability to solve problems grows dramatically. I mean, we saw this with the vaccine. Now, I know some of you are anti-vaccines or whatever, but it's truly astounding. They took what Pfizer did, again, a global effort, the startup company that actually developed the vaccine and the delivery mechanism is a German company. Manufacturing is going to be in Europe and the United States and potentially in Asia. You've got other vaccine makers all over the world working on this, sharing information, collaborating, joint ventures. I mean, globalization at its best is what you're seeing right now in terms of what is going on in the world. And it is fabulous. And it is truly amazing. It is truly amazing. And if the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccines actually are successful, then it's going to be, it truly is going to revolutionize vaccines, but it might revolutionize other ways in which we deal with disease. Because if we can target disease through these mRNA mechanisms, it's a relatively safe way to do it. It's a very targeted way of doing it with very little possibility of damage, of really bad side effects. And it truly could revolutionize a lot of what we do in medicine. So this Moderna and Pfizer, this is not trivial. Vaccines used to take years and years and years, decades to develop. This took 9 months, which is truly astounding. And it gives us a sense of where the science is in terms of our understanding of biology. So not only have we privatized space, we can launch stuff into space, we can make it super cheap, we can network, the entire world can be on one network, can be communicated. Imagine what happens to ideas. Imagine what happens to good ideas like ours when everybody in the world has access to these. Now, certainly these ideas only appeal to a certain fraction, but that fraction of a bigger and bigger number is fantastic. The number's astounding. If we're networked, imagine all the minds working on problems. Imagine the breakthrough in education. If now poor kids all over the world don't have to go to a local school where they might not get a great education, they can use YouTube just like you and me. And they have access to it at a cost of zero. They can take courses on Coursera or whatever. English becomes a universal language at that point. And it changes the world in profound ways because ideas now become universal, truly universal. They spread throughout the planet. The best people everywhere in the world can work on changing the world for the better, not just a few localized in certain communities, certain places who have the resources. I think what we're seeing in communication is truly stunning and amazing, and it's new. It's new. The world has never seen this. The scope of knowledge, the fact that knowledge is now shared and potentially shared, not shared, but potentially shared across hundreds of millions of people, billions of people across the planet. Knowledge of science, knowledge of engineering, and knowledge of philosophy is groundbreaking and has to lead to good things. So when I think about that, when I think about the scale, when I think about the amount of knowledge that is available today, when I think about the delivery mechanism and how cheap it is and how easy it is, when I think about the potential for disruption in the field of education on a global scale, I get super optimistic. Somebody says, oh, I'm talking about Skynet. Yeah, but think about a Skynet that doesn't come alive. A Skynet that has no desire for power. But a Skynet that is used for people to communicate. A Skynet that is used for people to learn, to educate themselves, to access the good, to access knowledge and information. I mean, again, think about, I've talked about this in past shows, all the knowledge in the Roman Empire was in a few centers. And when those centers collapsed, knowledge disappeared. Yes, it was preserved in Constantinople a little bit, and in Baghdad, and ultimately in Moorish Spain, and it came back into the West, but it took 1,000 years. Think about the fact that now knowledge is spread across 8 billion people. It's truly, I think, hard for us to imagine. And when we look back, these are revolutions in the making, and part of it is SpaceX reducing the cost of satellites, reducing the cost of putting loads into orbit, and making this ubiquitous. So, talk about biotech and vaccine development. I mean, again, the revolution there is stunning. A few decades ago, we mapped the human genome. I mean, not we, scientists mapped the human genome. And we still haven't even scraped the surface in terms of what that means for human longevity, for human health, for human well-being. There is so much science to be done over the next 20, 30 years in understanding the human genome and in then mapping the human genome over onto disease, longevity, aging, and all the problems, medical problems that ail the human race. I mean, I'm super positive about the abilities of our scientists to come up with ways in which to extend human life, and not just any human life, but extend human life positively into the future. And then, if you take the fact that artificial intelligence, really fast calculating machines, computers, not really intelligence in the proper sense, but still, they call it AI. If you bring AI together with biotech, because one of the problems you have in biotech is the math. You've got so many different combinations of DNA, so many different, the quantity of data is just stunning. And once you have AI, you have powerful computers who can computationally handle that kind of data. We are going to see major innovations, major changes in how medicine is done, in how longevity is provided for, and how we can move forward. That is going to come from a pharmaceutical business. That's going to come from our biotech industries, from new startups, from the integration of AI and biotech. And it's amazing what is happening out there. Now, I'm taking a little step for my own health, right, in this direction. So there's a company out of San Diego that you go in there for a day and they take blood and they do all the blood tests possible, everything, right? Then on top of that, they map your genome. They run you through an entire genome. I've done 23andMe, but this is much more comprehensive than 23andMe. Then they put you in an MRI and they do a full body MRI. They actually do 3 MRIs. They do a full body. They do one just of the brain. It takes about half an hour, just the brain. And then they do an MRI just of the of your arteries, heart, and everything like that. Then they put you on a cardioechogram. They run you through all the paces using the most modern technology possible. And then they integrate it all. So they've got the data. They can look in your body and see what's going on, which is pretty stunning. Right? They can actually, with the MRI technology, they can actually look at everything that's going on inside. Then, and including the brain, for example, and looking for early signs of Alzheimer's, looking for early signs of course, cancer. One of the things is that this is a way to catch things like cancer early, and of course, survivability rates when you have cancer go up. It's not a CAT scan. See, the problem with the CAT scan, the reason a CAT scan is problematic, is a CAT scan is radiation. This is an MRI. There's no radiation with an MRI. It's magnetic. So you can do this every year, which I plan to do. So what I've done is I buy a subscription with the company. And the subscription means that every year I go in once a year and they do the full body MRI and they can compare it year to year and they can see what's happening. And every year they take the blood test and they can take the whole thing and then they bring me top doctors and we put out a plan of how to allow me to live to be 150 years old, which is my ultimate goal. Healthy 150. Right? But that technology is amazing. And the fact that there are people working on that and energized around that and doctors that are energized around it and then that they have the technology to do it. I mean, MRI technology is pretty amazing. I've had many MRIs because of my bad back. So I've got MRIs of my back. I know my back really well. I've got images of it. But now we're going to do everything. Everything. Right? And it's expensive. It's expensive. But you only live once. What's more valuable than getting as much information as you can about your own health and your own body? MRI resolutions are getting amazing. The latest technology of MRI is stunning. And again, AI, these computer programs, are what interpret the MRI. And they're in many cases, far better than the human eye. They can, again, analyze far greater quantities of information than the human mind or the human eye can do. And it's going to be great. It's going to be, I'm excited about it. I'm excited about being, not a lot of people are doing this. Again, because I think it's expensive and it's time consuming and not a lot of people are interested. But I'm happy to be a guinea pig in this, and I'm happy to try it out and see. And if it's valuable, do this on an annual basis and hopefully help preserve my health and live a longer life. But imagine if that becomes ubiquitous. Imagine just like it costs only $10 a kilo to send stuff into space. Imagine if the cost of the MRI starts dropping and dropping and dropping. And things like this become accessible to pretty much everybody. And it just becomes a routine. You go in for an annual checkup. You spend a whole day on that checkup. And you do a full body MRI. And that's just something you do. I mean, the upside potential here in terms of applying technology to human well-being is astounding and amazing. And it gives me reason to be optimistic about health, life, longevity. And engineers and scientists and businessmen are constantly thinking these things up. And I live in a world in which people are constantly figuring out new ways to do things, new ways to make my life better. I mean, we live in an amazing time. If you obsess about politics, then you would think that we were living under the most ugly, horrific time human beings have ever lived. If all you listen to is the chatter about elections and Trump and Biden and Democrats and Republicans, you would think we were living in the end of times. Not in a time where I'm broadcasting this live to the world at a marginal cost of zero. Everybody's watching it, and it's stunning, the technology we have. And I'm living healthily, and we know more about healthy diet and exercise and everything else. I mean, the beauty of technology is not that it's going to solve the problem. The beauty of the technology is as you get older, you're going to be diagnosed with more problems. I know a lot of people who, a good friend of mine, my best friend, one of my best friends, right? Healthy diet, exercise, got sleep. His wife would really watch his diet. At the age of 52, got a heart attack. 52. While mountain biking, because he mountain biked all the time, because great shape. Wouldn't it be nice if technology would have helped him not have the heart attack? If he could have identified the problem well before it actually turned into a problem that would kill him? If you think just taking a flu supplements and running and doing whatever, that's going to be enough, no, you don't understand how health works. Technology is going to allow you to live much, much longer, much, much healthier. The name of the company in San Diego. You had to ask that, right? I'll try to figure it out in the next few minutes. I have it in my email chain somewhere because I just received an email from them confirming my visit soon. So I'm gonna look for that. And try to find it and get it to you. The name of the company. They should give me a percentage. Like if you sign up, I want you to tell them that you heard about it on my show, because then maybe they'll give me a discount from my annual subscription if they bring them more customers. One of the things I want to do is I'm going to do a podcast interview with the CEO of the company to talk about what they do and how they do it and all of that, and again help them get more clients, but also help increase the visibility, because I think it's such a great idea. I actually don't know what email address they would have used. All right, I will get it. I'll get the name of the company. Probably not today's show, but for next show, I'll get the name of the company. All right. So what are we doing? We did biotech. Yeah, I mean, and technology more broadly. I mean, we're gonna have driverless cars. We're gonna have. Technology is just moving forward. And not moving forward as fast as it could if it was freer. It's not moving forward as radically as it could be if there were more free people and our educational system were better and there were more engineers, or if we had better immigration policy and we had more of the smartest people coming into the country. Remember, people like Elon Musk are immigrants. Elon Musk is an immigrant to the United States. I imagine if we had better immigration policies and truly the brilliant of the world came to America and innovated and built and created here, it would be truly stunning, right? Stunning. So it's I think we live in the best of times, and in a time where if our ideas are good and if we're good at marketing them, educating people about them, teaching people about them, then there's never been a better time to change the world. We have access to 8 billion people. We're going to have greater access, faster access to them as the years move forward. We have the technology. We can live longer. We can live healthier. You guys who are young out there, I know most of you are between 25 and 45. Most of my listeners are between 25 and 45. You guys still have many decades before you reach an age where you have to worry too much about your health. And science is going to develop significantly. Now, again, my big regret is that it's not happening fast enough, that the FDA there is stopping us at every corner, that the FDA makes it so difficult, that there are not enough educated people, and our educational system sucks so badly, and all of that. Somebody says murders in the United States have increased massively. They're still way, 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 way below what they were in 1992, even though they went up this year. They're way, 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 way below what they were in 1992. So how bad could it be? Because 1992 was not like a year where you wanted to build a bunker and go hide somewhere. Yeah, I know. Some of you are older than me. I didn't mean everybody is. But so Jones, if you're older than me, you remember 1992. You remember when murder rates in the United States were significantly higher than they are today. As bad as they are right now. Murder rates in the United States have been plummeting since 1992. They blimped upwards in 2020. And my expectation is that they will start going down again next year. Once we get over this COVID thing, murder rates will start going down again. And that's true, by the way, of all violent crimes, not just murder, and all property crimes as well. Most crime, particularly violent crime, have gone down dramatically since 1992, and even in this year. Jones was living in Australia in 1992. Well, he missed out on, I remember the 70s, 80s, and 90s in the United States, and some places like where you couldn't go outside at night, including New York City, New Orleans, other places. Murder rate was far, far higher than today. All right. So, look, there's a lot to be pessimistic about in the future. But there's a lot to be optimistic. The optimism is where there's freedom, technology, biotech, space travel, where the private sector is allowed loose, and where I think objectivists have a real chance of having an impact on the system. Education, primarily K through 12. I think we really have a shot at making a difference, at changing the world. Not to mention the fact that millions and millions and millions and millions of people have read Ayn Rand. Millions and millions and millions and millions of more people are going to read Ayn Rand in the coming years because of your work, the Ayn Rand Institute's work, my work, and other people's work. And while those people might not join the objectivist movement, they might not become objectivists, they are impacted by it. Their lives are changed by it. It makes them better people. It makes them better people. So David says, I think as a young person watching this battle between collectivist and individualism, it is disheartening seeing it win in this age, collectivism win in this age, despite the advance we've made as a human race. It's very disheartening. It's very depressing. It's reason to be pessimistic. And there is strong reason to be pessimistic. But you can't give up, and you can't ignore the good that's going on. And by the way, there was reason to be super pessimistic in the 1970s. There was reason to be super pessimistic in the 1980s. I remember Leonard Peikoff and Harry Binswanger being super pessimistic in the 1980s. I remember George Reisman saying, you were going to have hyperinflation, and civilization was about to end economically. The United States economy was going to crash. 1980s, 90s. There's reason, and things are marginally worse every decade in some respects, and marginally better in other respects. And you can't ignore the things in which it's better. And you can't ignore the implication of the things in which it's better. And in my view, Ayn Rand is everywhere. Ayn Rand is in our political world, she is in our educational world, she is in the scientific world. Every day I meet somebody who says, I'm a huge Ayn Rand fan, I'm a huge fan of yours, Yaron, who's influential, who's significant, who I didn't know. I just had a conversation yesterday with somebody who is very big in the marketing world and in branding and the top brands in the world and everything. He teaches a class at NYU, and I'm going to teach a class for him in a class that he teaches. I didn't know him, didn't recognize the name, right? He reached out to me, and he listens to the show. He might respond. He listens to the show regularly, and he's an influencer. He's somebody that has an impact. And we've got a date now in March for me to come to NYU and talk to his students. I might spend, 2 to 3 hours with them. Nudge them a little bit. It won't change them completely, but nudge them a little. We are going to bring these ideas into the culture. And we are bringing these ideas into the culture. And you guys can help me bring these ideas into the culture by liking the show so the algorithm treats it well, by sharing the show so other people in your network can see the show, by supporting the show financially so we can grow it and make it bigger. And yes, we're still small in the big scale of things, but we're small and growing. Somebody just posted that my interview with Lex, which I think is a good interview. I think it's an interview that would bring new people to Ayn Rand. I think it's an interview that's going to intrigue people interested in science and math about Ayn Rand's ideas. Well, 184,000 people have now seen the interview. And Lex, who sometimes shows up on the chat here, who listens to the show periodically, which was quite shocking to me, has 806,000 followers now. That's good stuff. That's reason to be optimistic. Yes, I don't have 800,000 followers. Imagine if that happened. But maybe it will happen. And maybe we together can make it happen. I'm not pessimistic about that. So, don't give up. The battle is yet to be won, but it isn't lost. And we can still fight the authoritarianism. We can fight the collectivism. We can fight all this. We're going to have to be vigilant. This is part of the reason I was so anti-Trump, is because I think it's really, really important that we are vigilant about who we are and who we are not. And we're going to get this message out, and we're going to chip away at the collectivists, and we're going to chip away at the subjectivists, and we're going to chip away at all the bad people out there, and we're going to get our ideas, and we're going to grow and get better at delivering them. And again, we're going to get you more excited and more enthusiastic, because at the end of the day, I can't do this alone. You guys are going to have to get excited about changing the world, and you guys are going to have more aggressive, and you guys are going to have to help me get to 800,000 subscribers. Right? We'll be at 24,000. Well, I mean, we should certainly be at 24,000. Within a few days. I don't think it's realistic to say we could be at 25,000 by the end of the year, but you never know. And of course, it's in your hands, not in mine. If you're not a subscriber right now at the show, please subscribe. You can help us get to 24,000 soon and to 25,000 quickly. But there's no reason we can't be at 25,000 by the end of the year if you guys did more to share and to encourage your friends and your acquaintances and your people in your social media to subscribe, to like, to financially support the show. We're doing a lot of stuff on other platforms. We're getting the word out there. We're going to start an email list, right, Action Jackson? We're going to have an email list. You guys will all subscribe to my email list soon. And we're going to do everything we can, other than change my ideas, which is the one thing I won't do to get new subscribers. But within the scope of me not changing my ideas, we're going to do everything we can to get as many subscribers as possible. And then it will be what it will be. But we can grow this. And the future can be bright on every front. And we are going to use technology. And I am looking for a global audience. I don't care where you're from in the world. Please subscribe. And let's fight this together. Let's fight this together. Let's engage in this battle together. Somebody says, finally an email list. Yes, do you hear that, Action Jackson? Finally. So you guys, you'll get a thing to send your email in. We're going to develop the list, big list. It'll make it easier, to raise money, but it'll also make it easier to grow the platform. We get easier to get new people. We're also now on Parler, on Minds, on Instagram, on TikTok, on every social media platform known to man. We are working on, right? We are working on. So, and the fact is that interviews are much more palatable to people, much more likely that people subscribe to an interview show. Also, I'm controversial. A bunch of people hate my guts for all kinds of reasons. The left hates me, the right hates me, the middle hates me, everybody. It's easy. What I say is super, super, super controversial. Thank you, John. Thank you, Noel. Thank you for the support. I really appreciate it. All right, let's do some super chat. We got a bunch of super chat, and we're running out of time. All right. Oh, we said dollar first, so this is a $50 question. It's hard to be optimistic with so many so-called rational people buying into conspiracy theories. I know. I've said this before. The thing that made me most that made me more pessimistic than anything I think I've experienced in my life is people's reaction to Trump. But there are good signs, like the speed of vaccine development. Yes, cover that. Protein folding solved by AI. Absolutely. I mean, this integration of biology and AI is, we can only imagine, right? Etc. Is this the end of the so-called great stagnation? Unfortunately, I don't know. Stagnation is going to continue because while we see these massive advancements in some areas, the economy generally is too controlled and regulated for it to spread out across everything. So we will continue to see these pockets of great innovation and great movement forwards and great wealth creation. Look at the NASDAQ. There's huge amount of wealth creation going on. But it's going to be pockets. It's going to be pockets rather than across the board. And that's a danger because there's still going to be a lot of people who are going to be left behind, if you will, and are going to complain and are going to want socialism as a consequence. And this is the thing, a mixed economy makes people want more socialism, not more capitalism, because they attribute all the bad stuff to capitalism. But here's one other thing to be optimistic about, and not optimistic, but just to recognize. We're having these horrible lockdowns. We're destroying vast numbers of businesses and people's livelihood and making it very difficult to do work and all this stuff. I mean, around the world, hundreds of millions of people are being locked down for weeks, months at a time. And yet, there is no mass starvation in the world. The economies of the world have shrunk, but not shrunk anywhere near what we saw in the Great Depression. Because of technology, most of us can still work at home, or many of us can still work at home, and still create value at home. Because of technology, we still get our groceries from Amazon and all this other stuff, so our quality of life has not declined anywhere near what you would have expected it to have declined. One thing that COVID has taught us is how resilient we actually are, how flexible and resilient the U.S. economy is, how in spite of a virus and the horrible, evil, destructive response of government to it, in spite of that, we're still surviving. That's truly amazing. Truly is amazing. So it is, I think you can draw optimistic views. I mean, If you had told me 2 years ago, a year ago, that we would be shutting down the economy, we would be placing people on lockdown, I would have said, the U.S. is finished. The economy's shattered. They're rioting in the streets because they're unemployed. There's no money. The government is printing money like crazy, but it doesn't help. And yet, yes, I know there are some out there who are saying it's just around the corner. The complete collapse is just about to happen. But so far, we've survived this. And we are surviving it. And I think we will survive. The flexibility of the U.S. economy, the flexibility of the elements of capitalism, the elements of freedom, the elements of private property that still exist in the U.S. economy, and for that extent, the global economy, globalization, are massive positives that we can see coming out of coronavirus. And we need to be positive about. Well, if you look, Daniel asked, a couple of weeks ago, you said the market was pretty good the last couple of months. Can you elaborate? I can't remember what I said exactly and why I said it. But look, the stock market has been phenomenal. I mean, if you were in the stock market, you lost a lot of money in March, and then you made it all back, and now you're up for the year significantly. If you're in the S&P, certainly if you're in the NASDAQ, if you're into tech stock, you've made a lot of money this year, in spite of COVID, which to me suggests that smart people in the market. Now, it could be a bubble and it could all come crashing down, but who knows when and who knows under what circumstances. And you could sell today and be up a lot. The market believes that we will recover from COVID, that the economy will recover from COVID, that employment will come back, and that some of these companies, some of these tech companies, are resilient to pretty much anything we throw at them, including lockdowns. And that's truly astounding. That is truly astounding. I don't think we could have survived lockdowns as well as we have 20 years ago. And people say it sounds like we'll have inflation. Maybe we'll have inflation, but we can survive inflation as well. And we'll see whether we have inflation or whether the globalization trend and the technological trend of driving prices down actually mitigates much of that pressure to drive prices up that is created by printing a lot of money, and where the actual prices go up. We've got inflation, if you mean by inflation the printing of money. Interest rates will be low in the short run, and long-term rates will depend on whether there's inflation or not, or whether people believe there will be inflation or not. But so far, yield curve is relatively flat, interest rates are relatively low, and in that environment, businesses can invest, borrow money, and grow. Now, I don't think this is magic. I don't think that the government doing what it's done doesn't have consequences. And most of the consequences are being borne by, most of the consequences of what the government will be borne by the fact that we won't grow anywhere near as fast as we could. I mean, it's only science fiction that can imagine how fast our economy can grow. But we will and can still grow. Somebody asks, will small business survive as well as Amazon? No, of course not. But who cares? Why is small business of value? So, no, I mean, the beauty of Amazon is it provides value on scale. So it will do a lot better, no matter what. Now, to the extent that government policy is destroying small businesses, that is horrific. But small businesses, a lot of the businesses that are going under, particularly in retail, we're going to go under anyway. What COVID has done is sped it up. But it's tragic that restaurants and other businesses are going to go under because of government action. That's horrible. But yeah, Amazon is going to do better than small businesses because Amazon provides more value than small businesses. And I have no problem with Amazon doing great. I think it's great. Yeah, I know you're going to take the who cares statement. You're going to take it out of context. You won't add everything I said afterwards. But yes, why are small businesses I mean, if you can do something better with a big business, why do you admire small? There's nothing special about small. Yeah. You guys are now it's going to be all over. Yaron says he doesn't care about small businesses. It's in the context of. People will always find ways to make me sound as bad as they can imagine me sounding. But the fact is that what I care about is value creation. And that value creation can come for small businesses, can come for big businesses. It's like I say, I don't care about the poor. I don't care about the middle class. I don't care about the rich. Oh my God, Yaron doesn't care. No, I care about success. I care about virtue. I care about good, virtuous people. Small is where people learn about running a business, maybe, but small is where they learn about running a business, and if they're successful at it, what happens to it? They get big. The reason to start a business is not so it's small. The reason to start a business is so it becomes big. And the bigger it is, it means it's providing more and more value. It's about value creation, not about size. You know, it's always been the left and the populists who care about size. Anyway, all right. Let's see. Democrat governors are a lot more vicious and vindictive than GOP governors. Look at Cuomo versus DeSantis. Yeah, I mean, DeSantis has been particularly good, right? I don't know any other Republican governors quite as good as DeSantis. I mean, even Texas has not been as good. Ohio certainly has not been as good. Ohio, there's a bunch of lockdowns and shutdowns, and that's a Republican governor. But yes, generally, Democratic governors are much more vicious. Generally, in terms of our economic activity, generally Republicans tend to be better than Democrats. They tend to want more economic freedom than Democrats do. That is true. If I was voting for governor, I would almost always vote for a Republican governor, because at the local level, Republicans are going to leave me alone more than Democrats, and they don't have the power to do as bad of a things as Republicans on a national scale can do. Wow. So absolutely, the Democrats are vicious, and the more influenced they are by the far left, the more vicious they are. And you've got to avoid them unless the alternative is even worse. Let's see. I see an individualist, pro-capitalist element on the right, more on the right than I see on the left at all. Absolutely. Because the right still has some element of free markets and generally founding fathers and founding principles. The left doesn't have any of that, although in some areas, at least the center left has more of that, has more respect for reason, more respect for science, more respect for reason and science. It's, more respect for thinking, more respect for a woman's body, more respect for a bunch of different things. So, I even though he's on the left, I will take Steven Pinker over almost all intellectuals on the right. But yes, there's more individualism, more capitalist among the right. But the problem is that element on the right is shrinking. And my view is, under Trump, that element on the right has shrunk a lot. That is, that element of individualism has been demoted in terms of its importance on the right. It used to be much more important in the past. Today, it's not important at all, and it's been, as I said, demoted on the right. And if all I could vote for are the individualist, pro-capitalist elements on the right, then of course I'd vote for them. But they're not the ones winning elections. They're not the ones winning primaries. They're not the ones rising to national office, unfortunately. I mean, I am very respectful of people in the center right and what is called today the center right and center left. I think people like Steven Pinker, Sam Harris are better than most people on the right, even though I disagree fundamentally with them on many economic issues. On other issues, I agree with them, and I think we can have a debate on the things we disagree with. I think that people on the center right that are the same way. I think there are a lot of people on the center right that I support and encourage and want to see be successful. But it's people on the nationalist, religious right, which I think is coming to dominate the right, which I fear. Has technology moved humanity past any state of permanent tyranny? I don't know. I don't think so, because technology can be destroyed, and these things are ultimately about ideas, not about technology. But I think technology has made authoritarianism harder, certainly at a global scale. So you might have local authoritarians like in Iran or North Korea, but globally it's going to be very, very hard and continue to be very, very hard. So I think technology matters. And the technology is pro-freedom because it provides access to knowledge, access to all kinds of knowledge, including philosophical knowledge, to a greater and greater and greater global audience. Oh, man. What are your thoughts on professional wrestling as a form of art? Any thoughts on Vince Mahone and the WWE? I don't think professional wrestling is a form of art. I have my thought on professional wrestling as a form of art. It isn't. It's certainly not art. I guess you could argue that there's drama and that it's all staged because the fights are fixed. If that's the case, then it's a very low form of art. It's a very simplistic, superficial form of art that is, is some kind of mixture of elements of sport and elements of drama. But it's super low. It's super primitive. It's super boring and stupid and appealing to the lowest common denominator. If you think it's in a sense of art, right? But is it a selective recreation of reality based on an artist's metaphysical value judgment? Who's the artist? The people who write the scripts, the people who act it out. Is there artistry there? No. I mean, I think maybe as Ian says, it's low or folk art, but I think it's barely that. It's barely that. What are the scripts? It's the simplest. It's entertainment. That it is. It's entertainment. But art has to mean something. Sure, there's a skill. In that sense, it's show business. It's entertainment, but it's not art. I mean, art is at some point elevated. There's a certain elevation. It has to deal with metaphysical value judgments. There has to be people guiding it. Right? So any thoughts of Vince Mahone in WWE? Not many. I mean, I don't think of them much. I don't find it entertaining. I don't find it interesting. I don't find it anything. He's obviously, I find, I don't understand people who follow it. I don't understand people who find it interesting, although maybe some of you do, but I don't get it. He's made a lot of money providing people with entertainment. He's an entertainer. Good for him. There's a lot of forms of entertainment, rap music, lots of them, that I don't understand, think of value to human beings, and yet that people like. So, they've created value for some people, not particularly life-enhancing value, but value. There was another related question. Is Greco-Roman wrestling a form of art? No. It's a sport. And, it's a sport. It's an important sport. It's a sport that has a long history going back to Greece. But it's not art. Art is something completely different. And certainly wrestling as a sport is competitive. It's not prescripted. They're not actors. They're athletes. So I think Greco-Roman wrestling is a sport. Do you consider martial arts a form of art? No. They're also sport. Sport is not art. Sport is not art. Art is a selective recreation based on an artist's metaphysical value judgments. There's no metaphysical value judgment here. And more importantly, there's no recreation of reality. There's reality. Sport is reality. Sport is sport. It's a competition around physical action. Right? So, no, it's not art. It violates the definition of art. It doesn't meet the definition of art. And it's a sport. And, I'm not a huge fan of particularly the kind of sport where people hurt each other. I don't know if wrestling is like that. Wrestling strikes me as more civilized in that sense. But kicking people, boxing people, hitting people, slapping people, I don't enjoy it. I don't understand it. I know you guys, a lot of you do. A lot, friends of mine do. I don't get it. I never liked boxing. I never liked sports where the whole point of it is overwhelming somebody else physically. Particularly when it inflicts pain and damage and really can hurt somebody. I don't get. Yeah, I'm boomering hard here as if there's something unique about young people and sports, right? And martial arts, as if boomer generation didn't have its martial arts, or boomer generation didn't have its boxing and stuff. It's not me boomering, it's me being your honor. I don't like those sports. You guys always have to put a label on everything and put me in a tribe, put everybody in a tribe. Yeah, Alex loves it. Alex Epstein loves these things. I don't. Alex and I can disagree. We disagree on quite a few things. In spite of the fact that we like each other. I think we like each other. I think Alex likes me. All right. It seems bizarre that a philosophy promoting reason and reality would come from a woman. Whoa. Why is that? Why are there no major female philosophers in history other than Ayn Rand? Well, one big reason is that they weren't allowed to. Why aren't they major female artists, major female scientists, major female anything in world history? Anything in world history. Because women were second-class citizens throughout all of human history. They were expected to stay at home. They were expected to take care of the children. They were expected to take care of their home. They were expected to give birth to 14 kids because only 6 or 7 of them would survive. I mean, there were a few exceptions. Hypatia, something like that, who was a female philosopher. We know very little, unfortunately, about her, but she was amazing. She was really good. She was Aristotelian as far as we can tell. As somebody says, Ayn Rand enjoyed the poetry of Muhammad Ali. I mean, lots of people like boxing. I don't like it. I didn't say that boxing was anti-objectivist. I just said I didn't like it. Jesus Christ. You guys, some of you guys are intolerable. You had, starting in the late 19th century, you started having women who were scientists. Marie Curie comes to mind. But before that, and again, in the 20th century, you had Maria Montessori, you had Mary Cassatt, who was a female painter. You had female painters in the 19th century. You could go back even further. But it's rare. And it's rare because women were marginalized. They weren't allowed to go to school. They weren't allowed to go to university. They weren't allowed to have careers. I mean, George Sand, she could be an intellectual because she dressed like a man and pretended to be a man for most of the time. Yes, you can put all the women. Now I've got lists of women because I said women can't. I said in history, in 2,000 years, and you can list a dozen. Or maybe 2 dozen. Until the Enlightenment, women were not allowed. But you can find Renaissance women painters. When you go to Florence, you can find some. It was rare, and they had to hide it, and they were persecuted. So this idea that women have been treated well in all of history, I mean, this anti-feminism of all its variations, idea that some people in the manosphere, I guess, or whatever, promote that, oh no, women are being discriminated against for millennia, and therefore have not achieved anywhere near what they're capable of. And I think we started to see them beginning to achieve in the Enlightenment, and then even more in the 19th century, and boomed in the 20th century and 21st century. We'll see, but no question in my mind that as they become freer, as expectations of them become the same, we will get more and more and more women great achievers. There's nothing about being a woman that eliminates being able to be a great philosopher or a great scientist or a great anything, except maybe when it comes to certain physical feats. It's okay. I don't know why. Yeah. Would you support mandatory vaccination for an Ebola pandemic where 50% who contract the virus die? No, because I wouldn't make it mandatory because the people who contracted it would die. So if you wanted to live, you would take the vaccine. And if you didn't want to live, you would die. Now, I would completely justify isolating people who had Ebola. And, already had it, so vaccination wouldn't help them. And vaccinating everybody else, but you wouldn't have to force it. If you don't, Ebola does spread, but it's hard for it to spread. So once you get it, you're dead. You get very sick very quickly and you die. Now, could you create a scenario where it would be pro-individual rights to vaccinate, force people to be vaccinated? No, because you can't inflict something like that permanently on people by force when they haven't done anything. You can isolate somebody who already has the vaccine because they're a threat, who has the virus because they're a threat. But if somebody is not a threat to you, you can't use force against them. And if I'm healthy, I'm not a threat to you. Not yet. Why not stream on Twitch? I don't know. If Action Jackson sets up an account for me on Twitch, I think I can stream simultaneous on Twitch to everything else. So I don't have an account on Twitch. So, Christian, set up an account for me on Twitch and we'll start streaming on Twitch. Who knows what'll happen? Maybe I'll be a big hit on Twitch. But aren't you supposed to play video games while you're on Twitch? Isn't that the point? Is there any amount of realized or potential COVID-19 caused human damage to society that can justify a law that bans or restricts certain voluntary physical interaction between two non-COVID positive people? Non-COVID or positive people? I don't know. I can't quite decipher the question. But if the question is there ever any justification for the government to stop two healthy people from interacting with one another voluntarily because of a virus? The answer for the most part is no. I mean, maybe we could come up with some outlandish example where the government would have to do it. But if you're both non-COVID, neither of you is a threat. And if you both have COVID, neither of you is a threat. So the government has no business intervening. The government only has a business intervening when you are positive and you are a threat to people who are negative. That's the job of government, is to protect the people who are negative from those who are positive. But they have to know they're positive. Otherwise, they have no business doing it. Yeah, all right. Action Jackson, are we creating an account on Twitch? Well, who cares if it's the end of Twitch? We'll be while it's dying. It costs me nothing to stream on Twitch if we can create an account. Since conservatives want control of the mind and liberals are materialists that want to control the muscle, does this mean there's an opportunity in politics for education? Since illiberals dominate there? Yes. Yes, I definitely think that the American people, based on this last election, the American people don't want their minds completely controlled, and they don't want their physical being completely controlled. And by the way, I think Ayn Rand made that observation about conservatives wanting to control the mind and liberals wanting to control the material life. And I think since then what's happened is conservatives, or the right generally, want to control everything, and the left wants to control everything. I don't think that differentiation is as clear-cut as it used to be. Right? I don't think anyway, so I think that there is a real opportunity for people who don't want to have their lives controlled to be educated about what that would look like and what that would mean. And that's what we're trying to do. And I think you could pick people off from both what I'll call the center-right and center-left, the people who don't want the control of the right, don't want the control of the left. All right, those are okay. How soon did you explicitly put out your values, morals when pursuing a romantic relationship? I think you can have a good guess on their morality by their hobbies and interests. I'm not a good example because I was young and stupid. And I would put it out very early. So on our first date, I took my wife to a lecture that was related to objectivism, and I gave her the Fountainhead to read. That was on our first date. I gave her the Fountainhead. So I put it out there right in the beginning. So I don't have a lot of advice. Probably not a good idea in the first date. Probably you want to build up to it. Exactly when depends on the person, and depends on you, and depends on her, and depends on how the relationship is going, and when you think it's appropriate. I think you want them to know you enough so that they don't think you're a complete wacko when they discover it. When they discover, I don't know, your love of Ayn Rand or whatever. Is it valid distinction some people make between being pro-capitalism and anti-corporatism? No, because there's nothing about capitalism that's corporatist. The burden is on us to properly, constantly define what capitalism is. Somebody asked, did my wife take to it? Well, she's my wife. Yes, the next morning she came to me and said, I'm already loving the Fountainhead. And she loved the Fountainhead. And then she read Atlas Shrugged, and she loved Atlas Shrugged. And yeah, so yes, I mean, my values, my wife's values are completely aligned. So it worked in my case, but I got very lucky. And I was very young, and she was very young, and in many respects we grew up together. And got married young, and it worked. But that's just me. I said, when? When, what? When did she take to it? Immediately. So she was a fan immediately. I mean, there are two types of people who read Ayn Rand. The people who say, Ayn Rand changed my life. Ayn Rand completely changed my life. And that's me. My ideas were very different, and she changed my mind and changed my life. And then there are people who say, Ayn Rand just explained and confirmed what I thought I was all along. And that's my wife. And, in that sense, we're completely different. So the distinction between corporatism and capitalism is important. It's up to us as capitalists to say that cronyism, or what they call corporatism, has nothing to do with capitalism. Cronyism is a feature of statism. Capitalism is about freedom. Capitalism is freedom. The essence of capitalism is freedom. It's individual rights, and it has nothing to do. It's the only system where you cannot have corporatism, where cronyism goes away. At restaurants, what % tip do you leave? Have you ever left a life-changing tip? I've never left a life-changing tip. I leave typically 20%. When I was younger and poorer, I'd leave 15%. Then I gave 18%. Now I give 20%. Sometimes at restaurants I go to a lot and I have a relationship, maybe 22%, once in a while 25%, but I've never left a life-changing tip. Do you view the Texas GOP's alluding to secession as stupid antics or more ominous? I think it's stupid antics and ominous. It just shows again how if they were seceding because of a principle, I get it. If they were seceding because they wanted to protect individual rights, all right? But they're seceding because they think this election, because of conspiracy theories, was stolen. So I think it's unbelievably dangerous because it's more dangerous, reckless, stupid, because it reaffirms the authoritarianism within the Republican Party, the authoritarian tendencies within the Republican Party, and it's based on pure emotion, and it's based on the arbitrary. Baghdad Bob is alive and well in America in the manifestation of Trump denial that he lost the election. I don't know who Baghdad Bob is. Disgraceful that primacy of consciousness and privacy of emotion rule amongst the Trump cult. I agree. It's very sad that people don't see through the lies and the deception that's going on, and unfortunately, and this is the thing, I don't really blame the Trump voters. I blame the intellectuals. I blame the talk radio show hosts. I blame the politicians. I blame the leadership that is playing along with Trump. I mean, the rest of the people, if Mark Levin and Rush Limbaugh and these guys constantly harp and constantly pretend that there is real fraud going on, then what are regular people going to think? Yeah, it's complete emotionalism. I've watched the witness testimony, and you could have that in every election. The kind of things that they're raising happen in every election, and none of them present evidence. None of them present evidence. And again, every court in the land has thrown it out. Every single court in the land has thrown it out, including Republican courts, including Trump appointees, including the Supreme Court. They've all thrown these arguments out. So yeah, I can have, yeah, exactly. If I disagree with Trump, then I'm in CNN or I'm a leftist. We get it, WPR. Everybody who disagrees with you is of the left and therefore CNN, because you can only think in binary terms, the left and Trump, nothing else. I mean, it really is shocking that this is the epistemology of so many people. As I said, this is what's made me so pessimistic over the last 4 years. You can listen to this evidence, and I can take any topic. UFOs. I bet you I can find 1,000 eyewitnesses who will be very passionate and eloquent and yet provide zero evidence. Prove it in court. There's a court. It's courts. Courts in this country are still function fairly well. Trump courts, not just any courts. Courts appointed by Trump. There are lots of witnesses that are illegitimate, that are fake, that are emotional, that misrepresent what they see. You could go on and on and on and on. On and on and on and on. Evidence. Rule of law. Rule of law. All right. I know you're anti-religion, but do you agree with governors in certain states not allowing people to go to church and practice their religion? I don't think that if I don't see why I'm not allowed to go and listen to a music concert and you're allowed to go to church. I don't see the difference. If there's a ban on gatherings, I don't see why church should be different. Right? So I don't think there should be any lockdowns. I don't think there should be any ban on gatherings. But if there's a ban on gatherings, why are you discriminating for religion and against music gatherings, philosophical gatherings, speeches that Iran gives and whose living depends on it? So, no, I don't. I think it's completely wrong of the courts to pretend to give special privileges to religion. What's the name of the company in San Diego? I don't remember right now, but I'll get it to you in a future show. Do you think that the stock market is artificially valued because so many people buy stocks in place of losing money in a saving account? Yeah, there's an element that I think that parts of the stock market, not all of the stock market, some stocks are cheap right now and are great buys, but there certainly is a part of the stock market that's, I think, overvalued. I think markets are efficient over the long run, and over the long run, that'll correct itself. But it's very dangerous to bet against the market. So yes, I do think it's artificially valued because people are excited about Zoom and excited about Amazon and so on. But I haven't done the evaluation thoroughly enough to be able to. I've done the evaluation on the cheaper parts of the market, but it's hard for me to say which stocks exactly are the most expensive. But it looks like there's just too much optimism around technology right now, given that I think there's going to be we're entering a low growth period economically. Even on this chat, they're collectivists. Yes, people just don't think in terms of economics, and so it's no wonder there is an ever expanding definition of rights. Well, it's not that they don't think in terms of economics; they don't think in terms of principles of economics or principles of politics, individual rights. People don't think in principle. That's the challenge that we face, and that's what makes it so difficult. Because you don't think in principle, emotions can be so easy to manipulate. Principles guard you against emotional manipulation. Do you think it's possible that big business can cheat in order to be more competitive? For example, Microsoft using the state to destroy competition. Sure, they can. And that's not good when they do. And they should be called out when they do. But Microsoft gave away a browser for free. It didn't cheat. Oh, in order to be more competitive. Can cheat in order to be more competitive. I don't know that Microsoft used the state to destroy competition. It does today. It never used to. So yes, I think businesses can cheat all the time using government. That's why I'm opposed to government regulation of business. That is the only way I know of preventing businesses from using government to cheat in that way. So the way to do it is to get government out of the business of business. All right, we've gone 2 hours. We're going to stop here. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to like the show when you leave. We should be at about 200 likes, not 140. I'd appreciate if you liked the show before you left. Even those who disagree with me, you must get something out of the show because you show up and you argue. Also, and I give you time. So like the show, share the show. Please become a subscriber, a monthly subscriber. That really helps, and it shows that it's a trade that is value for value. You can do so on youronbrookshow.com/support. You can do so on Patreon, Subscribestar, and Locals. All right, guys. I will see you tomorrow. I'm not sure exactly what time, and I'm not sure what the topic is, but I will. I'm one of these days, maybe tomorrow, I'll do something on the 7 deadly sins. We should do something on the 7 deadly sins. Are they deadly?